And welcome back everyone to part two of the Callout Manager series of videos. And I'd mentioned in the last video that I was going to have a working example and show you through the Callout Manager how you can set up various workflow approvals, having the approval emailed to an approver and any kind of response such as approve or reject and the details responded back to the admin who's logged in attempting to assign the IP address. So there's a couple changes in IPControl first that we'll want to make and ensure that are set up. And the first of those is that in the um, tools policies, that we want to have the enable workout call out policy or enable workflow call out policy true. The others can be set to false, or if you're doing this production, make sure that you don't interfere with those. But go ahead and set this policy to true. And lastly, that we want to work within the workflow type of device. Again, if you're doing this production, I can't say this and won't anymore after this. Use a no lab, something that you can work with and not interfere with any kind of resource record workflows. The device workflow is different than the other, and we want to use this for the approvals kind of moving forward. So the first thing is setting up the policy, enabling those, and you'll need to have an administrator defined that once you've enabled this policy in your either administrator policies, which under say IPM user I could do this, or the group or membership if you have those defined. Now I created a default role previously in our IPControl Quick Start, and I'll go ahead and define it here. And effectively in the access controls, when we set up the container policies for read, write, delete, there is now a device approve access checkbox. And what this means is any containers with this enabled, an administrator can approve their IP address assignments within any subnets that fall within this container. So we have this set up that they cannot do this, which means that someone who does have this access and permission can do this, and currently that is IncAdmin, who I'm going to use for most of this process. So once we have the user and we assure that they cannot make any changes, you'll then notice that you'll have under the management pending approval screens any kind of submissions and approvals that are pending for your approval as an administrator, such as IncAdmin or someone who has permissions to approve their device changes. Now this right here then, once we've enabled that, we want to SSH, or using an editor remotely, we want to modify the callout manager script. And we want to go through a couple settings, which I'll again cover here to make sure that for my particular workflow and callout that it's going to support the settings in the environment. So first off, the settings that we need to initially set are the output path, again, defining the opt and control temp callout. We definitely want to make sure output.xml is set to true. We further need to have, as you scroll down further into the callout manager file, there are several different workflow device workflows that we want to use. So we want to make sure that the workflow device create ready for review equals, and we want to put in the name of a script. Now my script that I'm using in this example is under the opt/ncontrol/etc/support/sample-scripts and is named upload_callout.sh. It will handle all of the device flows through the single script. So the create, we want to make sure that the create workflow, delete, the approved and the rejected workflow device callouts are enabled. So we want to uncomment the # before those, and you want to save that. And once that's saved, you need to SSH to your device. So you want to make sure you're on your executive, and you need to restart the callout manager. So you would do opt and control etc, and then it would be cm_restart. So /cm_restart if you're in the same directory. And that will reload the definition for each of those callout mechanisms. Now, the other side of this script, and we probably should have done this before we enabled the file, however, we can do this at any time. So I have created just a real simple bash shell script that when the callout manager is told to execute this script, which it is, and we set up in that callout manager, it passes an argument, which is the file name. So we're going to take the file name, we're going to make it a variable called upload file, and this is going to be data equals at file name, which is the curl syntax it understands to store all of this file in a data environment variable. So we're going to do upload file, and it's going to send it up as data. The log file that we're going to log this to, and I have set up a variable equals with a backtick for the curl command to run curl-k to skip the security certificate, -f for file, and then I'm going to specify the upload file. And lastly, specify my URL endpoint for the workflow that I'm going to call. And in this case, I'm calling my CAA, which is HTTPS, its IP address, :1880/workflow/callout, capital MGR, so manager. And then in that workflow, I send out a result and I tell it to read the result. And effectively, if it's successful, I want to go ahead and delete the file. And that's what I'm going to tell it to do. And so this script, you can either copy and paste or however, but put that into a directory where you'll have access to it, such as these support sample scripts. And that's where I have mine, and that's where I have it set in the callout manager to call it. So here, once it's in the file and you've either created, typed it, or copied it, you want to make sure that it's executable. So go ahead and do chmod callout.sh. And we should be good. And from here, you should just be able to, call the command. And we won't get anything, but at least we can see that it works. Now, another thing I want to make sure I do here is I want to put in the -s, which will tell it to do silent, which is what I want to happen. Let's make sure that is silent. Okay, yes, very good. So no more output there. So all it's trying to do is a RM, and it's look for a file name, and so we should be good. So now that this call manager's restarted, you can go in and actually look at the log if you wish. You go to opt and control, and you can go to the log directory, and you can tail the callout manager log and actually see it in progress as it's doing these functions. Okay, so now what you need here effectively, and I'm going to tell you what we've done and what I'm calling in this CAA, is I have a workflow that I've created. It was very specific based on a customer request to have a way to interact with the workflow approvals and to interactively send emails with some additional data elements that I could not get from simply emailing the file. So I have an email script that through the callout manager, I can just send an email and it'll pass all of those attributes. But the person on the receiving end has to parse through it. I thought, well, this is a great way to experiment with the callout manager, start looking at the Node-RED, see what kind of things I can do. And so I developed this workflow. And so it takes a upload of that callout manager file when it's ready for review for a create or delete, and when it's pending approval for approved or rejected. And so for each of these callouts, and it uploads a file, I read it in through a string and get the file. And then I also am using Node-RED because it processes XML and converts it to a JSON object that I can work with through JavaScript, which is really easy to do. So now I can go out and do other things. And one of those is I go out and query the administrator or set up the email to query what administrator in IPControl is submitting the request and to pull out its email address. And then I'll go in and validate whether it's valid and then set up some other parameters. So I'm not going to go through all of this here, but the idea is that when I get down into the workflow portion, I get to the delete, create, approved, and rejected. And each of these functions then goes through a series of approval checks to make sure what part of the sequence of approvals it's in, and then sends a informational email back to the user or to the admins that a device is pending, or B, that a device has been approved to the administrator requesting. And that's it. And that's what I wanted to show you in this and show you how that works and kind of get some ideas behind the scenes. So now that we have our user, and I have INC admin here, and I'm in the management pending approval so I can quickly see this. And I have a PowerShell script that I'm going to run in the background that's going to allow me to just simply add some IP addresses so we can see this workflow process in action. So I just added an IP address, and effectively what I should see within the IPControl pending approval system is that there's an IP pending. In the workflow portion of this, I've already fed this information up and I've already sent the email. And in this email, it's sending it to the approvers list that I've defined. And it's basically saying there's a start, there's a pending approval, and it's for this administrator. Here's the details that it pulled out of IPControl. And here's a date, time, address, hostname, and FQDN, and domain name. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. And this is the email that gets sent to the approver. So now once I have the approver and I'm okay, I can go ahead and approve this or reject it. We might do both, and we'll have an approval and or reject message for each. So approve, and then we'll have basically another email that's immediately going to get sent out when that's approved, showing that the device workflow has been approved and created. And this is then sent to the user, which is going to be the administrator, that we're then going to say your device request has been approved. And if they then go into IPControl, they'll see that IP address information, and it'll be available for them to audit, edit, audit, modify, delete, etc. Okay, so all of those functions. And now that it's actually in the database, if we did the reverse of this and say looked at a delete, and let me run my delete script for this function, and we'll tell it address 239, and we should then see, well, that happened pretty quickly there, telling us that there's a pending delete function now that was just submitted, and this is being again sent to our administrator for approval. And once he's in the system for IPControl now, they'll see that message in real time and can approve it or reject it. So let's just do this for fun and do reject. I'm not going to spell that correctly, doesn't matter. And I'm then going to get an email back that says, well, your email was rejected. The approved IP address that you created has now been reverted. There's nothing left there for that placeholder. I'm sorry, here are my results and here are the comments. Now here I might want to put real comments like you need to have this type of information and it's not the same format, or maybe the name's incorrect or something like that. So, and that's it. So in that call out, this thing gives us kind of interactive real-time emailing of IP address workflows and pending approvals anytime any administrator in real time decides to do this. And it's handling all of that through the call out manager. And there's other things that I could really go in and hope to do with this, such as extending some of the workflows, or you can, so that you can have alerting or persistency of these messages, writing it to a file, making sure that it's being processed, reporting on that status, storing it in a database, some other functions perhaps. But it works well, and something that you can improve and put on top of the call out manager, and something that I hope that you can see there are things you can do that are custom to perhaps just you and your environment, that if you have a scripter or programmers, that we're going to expose as much data, as much function, and as much procedure as possible, that you can then attach to that to perform other kind of outlying tasks and processes as necessary. And just to kind of elaborate on that further, and maybe we'll come back one day and do this, is setting up like building router configs. That might be something we want to do through there as well. So I thank you for your time and appreciate you hanging out. And that's, I think, what we're going to do with the call out manager. I'm not going to end it necessarily definitively, but I'll leave it open in case. And if I get any comments or I decide to come back and follow up with any other functions, I will. Actually, we might do some with the monitoring, with the appliances and things as we get later down the road for some of the more proactive administration of the systems. Thank you, take care, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.